Women no longer need a man to start a family. So, what happens when a woman chooses motherhood over marriage and dares to defy tradition? Sounds bold, right? But for many professional women in their 30s and 40s, becoming a single mother by choice isn't rare anymore. It's fast becoming a reality. They've always dreamt of being a mother, but the right partner hasn't still come along. And with the biological clock ticking, the fertility pressure is real. Some have frozen their eggs, thinking they have bought some more time. But what if I told you that's not the insurance plan you once thought it is? So, what happens now? Just keep waiting endlessly for Mr. Right to arrive? Or take control and become a mother solo? And you might be wondering, wait, what? Is that even possible? Yes, it is. Thanks to medical science and IVF and the brave women rewriting these rules. But what about the society judgment? Can you really raise a child alone? Will the child miss having a second parent? What about the finances? These are tough questions women are facing. And today, we are not just asking them, we are challenging the answers. At 37, Rima Kiran, who is my guest today and NRI, one of the boldest decisions of her life to become a mother. Not by chance, not by circumstances, but by choice. No partner, no convention, just her courage, and a fierce belief in building the family she always dreamt of. In today's intimate conversation, we will find out what does it take to become a mother without a partner, how to choose a donor sperm to have your own biological child, the emotional, financial, and fertility challenges of doing it solo, the societal judgments, and how choosing herself became the most liberating decision of her life. And stay with us because towards the end, Rima shares that one thing she wishes someone had told her before starting the IVF journey. So if you are even considering this path or if you ever want to become a mother, you need to hear this. This is a conversation about trust, courage, and breaking the mold. It's about creating your own family, but most importantly, on your own terms. Hi, Rima. Welcome to my channel.
Thank you so much, Parul, for having me on here today.
So excited to have this conversation with you. So, Rima, why don't we get started by asking a little bit about your background, your origin, where are you originally from, where are you right now, and a little bit about your family as well, and then also talk us a little bit about that how this whole single motherhood by choice journey started.
Sure.
How old were you when it started? And let's just maybe start from that.
Okay, that is a big loaded question. So a little bit about me. I'm Indian, Gujarati, born actually in Canada. My parents immigrated over when after they got married, and my brother and I have an older brother. We were both born and raised here, so I've been back to India several times. But all of my family, actually, my mom's, all of my uncles, aunts, everyone seemed to have moved over to either Canada, US, or UK after they finished their education. So that is sort of my background. I am now currently living in Toronto. My sort of just a little bit about my background and career. I am an executive coach as well as a management consultant, specifically working in the pharmaceutical space. I have my own company. I've been doing that for 8 years, and that I've lived around the world, worked in China, all over Asia, Germany, Canada, and then I guess when I was 30, I decided it's time to come home, sort of settle down, hopefully find that partner, and and start my life. And I actually, through that time, I did have sort of a university sweetheart that I'd stayed connected with. I thought we were gonna, get married, and then, we got to the point of like, it's either time for us to get engaged or we sort of move on. And his mother did not approve. He was Indian as well, Rajasthani. His mother did not approve, and that was the end of that. And so I was 28 at the time when that happened. And I thought, by then I was already thinking we were going to get married, have kids, and life would go on from there. And, it didn't happen. And so it was sort of like starting over again, and, going back into the dating world and figuring out what I want. And having grown up with parents who were arranged marriage, I knew for me, I didn't want an arranged marriage. If they met someone and they said, this is a good guy, meet him. Fine, I would meet him, but I wasn't going to say, oh, my uncle found someone who's a doctor somewhere and you
I
go
know.
meet him and, a
Yeah,
good
yeah, yeah.
family.
It's
That's not.
scary. Yeah.
That's not what I wanted for myself. And so my
You
parents
wanted
were
that
well
connection,
aware.
I believe, with somebody before you can commit to that person.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was important to me. I wasn't going to settle just to have a family. That, if I was going to marry someone, it was going to be for love, and, that I truly believe we were going to, stay together. And so I was, I was careful in terms of who that person would be. And, time went on, year after year, birthday would come and go. And I would think, I'm getting older and older, and I didn't think I'd still be single at this point. And when I got to 35 is when I started sort of my journey, in terms of, I thought I could freeze my eggs and sort of buy myself more time. And I started the process, it was just around the time COVID had hit too, so it did sort of stall things a little bit. And then I finally did do it. The results were not what we were expecting. We thought we'd get about 10 eggs retrieved. It was showing up to be potentially two eggs, and we weren't even sure if they were going to be good eggs. So we canceled it. I changed clinics, which is typically happens a lot in the fertility world. And I then moved on, tried again, and again, we only got two eggs. And so at that point, I knew I didn't have the insurance policy that I was hoping for, and I had a decision to make. And for me, it was more important to be a mom than to have a partner at that time. I really, I definitely wanted to do this with someone. I was hoping to, but in the end, I didn't want to miss my chance at being a mom.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, for the viewers as well, I would like to emphasize, because I have read a lot about egg freezing and I know a bit about egg freezing as well, because as much as people market it as insurance policy and everything, it isn't. I mean, the only thing it can give you is A, if you have decent number of eggs, and secondly, you won't know the quality of those eggs, like the true quality of those eggs, until you fertilize those eggs, unless and until you go and use those eggs. And in today's world, and I'm not saying that young women should not go and freeze their eggs. It's better to do that as compared to do nothing about it. But I think the sooner somebody does it, I personally feel when somebody is in their late 20s, that's like the best time, because that's when women are the most fertile. We all know that after 35, our fertility rapidly declines. Like there is a rapid decline in the fertility. And fast forward, like I'm 38 myself, like fast forward few years, you will realize, oh my God, where I have landed. So I'm assuming by the time you finished your second IVF cycle, you were almost 37, I believe, 36,
Closer to
37.
30, yeah, 36, probably 37 at that point. Yeah. And I was left with that decision. Do I wait and hope I'm going to find someone? And, that was every birthday was depressing, because I was 1 year older, and I knew my biological clock was running out. And so you could feel it every year. And I was worried to hit 40 and then really miss my chance. And so I knew I had to make a decision. And so I did make that choice to move forward, thinking that was going to be the hardest part of my journey, making the decision. And then, I started the journey. We thought, because I was healthy, because all my levels looked good, I assumed in 3 shots, I should be able to get pregnant doing IUI, intrauterine insemination, with a little bit of medication to help out with producing sort of the eggs. And we did 6 rounds of that, and it didn't work out. But every round I thought to myself, this is the round, And when it wouldn't work out, I would think, okay, maybe the baby doesn't want to be a Capricorn or a Scorpio. Like, I would just think maybe that's just not my time, right? But I was so sure this was going to happen. Like, I could see it in my mind, and I knew the baby was coming. I just had to keep going. And so after the 6th round, I knew they would say IVF, and I was ready to do it again. And I thought, this is it. IVF is going to be the thing that works. We got 4 eggs this time. I unfroze the 2 from the previous egg freezing. We got 3 embryos, which is quite a good result from 6 eggs to 3 embryos. And then when we did the pre-genetic testing, none of them passed. And that period, like that moment, it just broke me in terms of, going forward emotionally. It was the hardest point in my fertility journey. And they did say at that point, you are experiencing unexplained infertility because all your levels look good. We don't know if it's the egg, the sperm. We can't tell you what exactly is causing this outcome. And so after that, I realized I was trying to do everything right. I was trying to eat right, acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic, anything that I could find to help me get pregnant or to help my egg retrieval, I was trying to do. And I realized, I can't control the outcome of getting pregnant. And I had to learn the hard way of just pretty much breaking to figure out, now I just need to let go and whatever timing, whatever that's supposed to happen, it's going to happen. But I can't, hold on or feel like I can control this anymore. And so we tried again for the IVF, did another IVF cycle. It was a much more relaxed cycle because I wasn't as invested. I just told myself we're going to keep going until I can't, and then or until the doctor says I can't, and then I'll find a doctor that says I can do it again. And just like I was just with the mindset, I'm just going to keep going, and that's going to be the way. We got the highest yield this time. It was 9 eggs came out. Uh, ended up again with 3 embryos, and then one failed, one was inconclusive, and then one passed, and that one became my daughter, who is now 2 years old.
Wow. So you did, I think in total, I think you did 4 rounds of IVF,
Yeah,
including the fourth one being your successful round and
yeah,
6 rounds of IUIs. I mean, that's like a lot.
that's a lot.
So
Yeah.
in a span of how many year? 1 year, 2 years?
This was the 6 IUIs and the IVF. I was pretty much going round after round, so I would say it was pretty much almost a year in terms of the IUIs and the final either 2 IVF cycles, but the ones, so I would say overall 2 years.
Yeah. So how did you cope up with all this? Of course, emotionally, you spoke about, because I feel that that's as much as people think that IVF is physically demanding, it is to some extent, but it's more emotionally
Yeah,
because there are these highs and then the lows and then the expectations and the unmet expectations, and then you don't know what's going to happen. So I think that's where it becomes most challenging. How has been your experience
yeah.
uh, going through so many cycles?
So for me, I wasn't one for social media at that time, so I wasn't actually aware. There is a lot of support, single mother by choice community groups and things available. Given being an Indian, there's definitely no one that I knew choosing this path that I felt like I could find or speak to just in general. Like I didn't know anybody, and to this day, I still only know maybe less than 10 women who have chosen this path being now on social media. And so for me, what's helped me is one, I'm really big on personal development. Being a coach and working on myself and self-development, that really helped me go through the highs and low in terms of meditation, in terms of journaling through, in terms of self-coaching myself through the hard times. I had a lot of tools already because I'd been doing so much around self development that helped me get through some of these hard times. And that's why I felt, when I really hit my bottom, I thought to myself, maybe I'm going through this so that I can help other women go, through their process so that they don't have to feel as alone. And that is how Choice Mom Coach was born because, I thought if I make it through, if I get pregnant and I have my daughter, that is something I want to do to give back is help other women go through this journey. And so that is why I started Choice Mom Coach to help women, one, for Indian women, Asian women, to know that this is an option, and two, to help women feel, navigate through the process and not feel alone and have the tools to be able to go through those highs and lows, as you said.
Yeah. I think, you bought the culture aspect and all of that. So I really want to also understand that one is that what you were going through on your own, but you have your family, extended family, your parents. Uh, what were the kind of struggles that you faced, either internally or in real world, in terms of the judgments around? Because I feel that. When we're talking about Indian, because I'm also an Indian, like, at least you are like born and brought up in Canada. Like for myself, I've spent my entire life almost in India, so I very much understand where what you're talking about, because I feel in India there are two big issues. I feel that women usually may face for choosing something like this. One is the judgments, the social stigma, the taboo, and all of that. Because I feel that it's so confusing to me at times that people are okay if somebody is a single mother by circumstance. Let's assume if she's a divorcee or a widow or something, it's still something that they have seen. At least they can relate to some extent. Nowadays, at least in big cities, I'm not talking about small towns in India, but at least in big cities, people still have a level of acceptance toward that. But taking donor sperm and going through IVF route and then getting pregnant on your, that's something which is a bit unheard of. So I think there is obviously this whole social stigma around that. Where's the father, the biological father, or what will people say, etc., etc. And the second issue, obviously, is the financial aspect, because it is a big investment. I think IVF in itself is expensive process, and I know it's worldwide. Actually, in India also it's expensive. In Australia, where I'm, it's also expensive. I'm sure in Canada also it is expensive. So there is this financial cost of not just going through the process, but also raising a child on your own. So I really want to understand these two aspects, that how you navigated this, because I'm pretty sure that would help a lot of women. Uh, because in my mind, those are the two biggest constraints that women may feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the stigma, the judgment, I mean, unfortunately, our Indian community can be pretty judgmental in terms of what other children, are doing and what they aren't doing. Or, there's a lot of comparison in our community, I feel like, too, in terms of when
Yeah.
our parent, I hear this from the gossips whenever you go into the community of, oh, did you hear this child? They just got divorced. Or, oh, did you hear they didn't get into this university? Or, things that I find, none of anyone's business, but that's my opinion. But
Yeah, I agree.
when it comes to this decision, even for my parents, I brought this up initially years before I even chose this path. One time, we were having a discussion, and I just randomly said to them, you know what, maybe I won't get married. I'll just have a child on my own, without having really thought through or even being prepared to have that conversation with them, but more in a, I would say, in a flippant kind of way of just saying, I'm going to do this on my own. And the reaction was not well received. They weren't supportive at all. My dad more so didn't say anything, which means, he's not approving of the decision. And my mom would, she was like, she said, well, my brother actually even said, that sounds like a really selfish thing to do, to bring a child into this world without a father, because fathers are important. Which I don't disagree. I think fathers' roles are important. Just because I chose this path doesn't mean that I don't think fathers are important, doesn't mean that I don't think they play an important role. And it is why I surround, my daughter around her dada, her mama, her masas. I make sure there's still that, fatherly type figures
Connection. Yeah.
in her life, because I do feel like it is important. Um, but going back to the reaction, my mom was shocked of just, donor sperm. Like, we don't know who he is, we don't know his background, we don't know where he comes from, we don't know his education, all the things that are important to, a culture. It is important, caste system, all of these things are important to our culture, right? So when you say donor, and we don't they don't know what that means in terms of the information you will get, it is a bit scary. And a surprising sort of response from her was, wouldn't it be easier to just have a one night stand, and at least we would know who the father is, right? And that is the absolute worst thing you could do, because then you have to deal with all the legalities, or potentially, we know who
And the
is, but it's and the genetics, we have no
yes, the
idea,
genetics
right?
as well, because you don't know how this person is genetically even compatible to you.
Exactly. And so that's why I would say, it wasn't appropriate that I just brought up that topic without having the like understanding what it means to have a donor sperm. So my big advice when I talk to women who are speaking to their families about choosing a donor is, one, know that we are getting way more information than most couples know about each other before they get married.
Yes.
I know the genetic sort of disorders that my uh, sperm donor is carrying. I know his medical history. I know his parents' medical history. I know all his education background. Like, there is a very strong vetting process that happens in order for a donor to contribute. There's an essay. There is more information than you would expect, and there's definitely more information than both my parents had when they got an arranged marriage. And in terms of what I'm passing down on in terms of genetics. So that's one thing, is just to be, if you're going to have the conversation, make sure you're well informed about what the donor sperm could mean, and where you're going to be potentially getting the donor sperm. The second thing is, you got to understand, is they're coming from a place of fear. They're worried about you. They're worried you're going to have the judgment. They're worried you might struggle. They will worry about all these things. And so their reaction might be negative because it's coming from a place of fear. And one thing before you get defensive is understand they are processing this too, right? Like, you had some time to potentially process this on your own. They will need their own sort of time to process. They envision their daughter to get married and have the big wedding and the families coming together. And now you're saying, I'm bringing in donor sperm, which they don't understand. And so you also need to come into the conversation, or whoever needs to come into the conversation, with that understanding that this is going to take a little time.
So did you give your parents that time, or were you set in your own mind
So
that this is
because
the
I
I'm
struggled
going,
so much,
regardless of what you say or what you
yeah,
you just
so
got accepted eventually?
I mean, given my background of, my parents have always known one thing about me, is that I'm very independent. To go and live abroad and live in China and live, all around sort of the world, they've always known that I've been a bit more independent than maybe others have. And so they know when I make up my mind about something, it's pretty much set. And so when they saw me struggle, like, I was deeply crushed when my egg freezing didn't work out, and I realized I didn't have more time, and I couldn't wait for that partner anymore. They saw that, and in the end, fortunate for me, they just wanted me to be happy. And they said, if this is what's going to make you happy, then do it. So I was fortunate in that way.
Yeah. And I think, I feel that there are two things that I would like to say. And of course, I'm not as emotionally invested, so I can think more logically. But for somebody's parents who are emotionally invested in your process, their thought process can be totally different, as you rightly pointed out. They're coming from fear and what they would say, how they would explain, and those kind of issues. But I think there are two things. I think one is that I feel that families can come in different structures these days, at least. Uh, you are a single mother, there can be a single father. There are same sex couples as well these days. Sometimes the father passes away, sometimes a mother passes away. Sometimes you took donor sperm. I know women who took donor eggs, some women who adopted, foster care. So I just feel that there are no right or wrong answers when it comes to family building. It is what feels right to you, as long as it's legal, ethical, you're not harming anyone in the process. It's fine. And secondly, I think just because you've become a mother, or let's say somebody has become a mother, does not mean that you can't find a partner down the road. But the unfortunate reality is that women are born with a fixed number of eggs, and that comes with an expiry date. That's what how I say it. It's yeah, it is
True.
like a product, right? It comes with an expiry date, and when your time
Sure.
is up, time is up, and that's it. And you can have other options like donor eggs or adoptions, but if you are wish is to have your own biological child, then it matters. Fertility matters. And especially, I think what I'm seeing a single mother by choice, I think this trend is very common in women who are in their late 30s, early 40s, because of similar reasons. Like you pointed out, they not able to find the right partner, their fertility is declining. Maybe they are in a relationship, but the other person does not want to have kids, but the woman wants to have kids, and then they decide, okay, let's just do it on my own, right? So I feel that the more people are educated, people like yourself who are coming out talking about, hey, that's so brave of you to share your journey with everyone, and at least inspire others to, if not do, but at least start thinking about it. If they are in similar situation, if they really want to be a mother, but for some reason they don't have a partner, or they are divorced, or their fertility is declining and they don't see a way forward. So I feel that could be an option for them. And how did you manage your finances? I mean, I also want
Mm-hmm.
to understand that.
Sure. Yeah. So, having my own business, it does obviously allow some flexibility with
Okay.
funds and things like that. I do have a financial manager who does manage, my funds for me because that's just something. One, I'm not an expert in the market, but I do know my money needs to be in the market, and especially in the past few years. And so, I do have that handled. And then in terms of budgeting, there is, when you are going through this process, I will say the difference between a single mom and a single mom by choice is there's a lot more planning that happens, right? A single mom by circumstance, they end up single and then they have to figure it all out. A
Figure out.
single mom by choice, we're figuring it out as we are going through the journey. Once we're pregnant, even before pregnancy, it's like, okay, how much is it going to cost to get all the baby things? How much is it going to cost to do these? Like, we're doing the numbers way in advance and figuring out, okay, the budget I'm going to need for all the new baby things. Where am I going to get that? Do I need to get it from friends? Can I purchase certain things? So there's a lot more planning. And then, okay, when do I need to, how long will my maternity leave be? And then when do I need to have daycare ready? And how much will daycare cost? Like, the planning is much more meticulous for a single mother by choice than it is for a single mom. And that's just because we have time to plan, right? So it
Yeah.
is then saying, okay, this is my salary in terms of budgeting, how much more am I going to need now to add diapers, and, if I need formula, if I need daycare, like, we're considering all these things in our monthly expenses that we need to tag on now. But then we also have to consider, do we have any government support for having, baby bonus checks and things like that, so there are things that you just want to consider, but there a will, comes into place then.
Yeah.
Life insurance is something you start to think about. There are all these other additional things you will start to
Even I
plan
think
for.
your insurance you would have changed, because I mean, when you got up pregnant, I'm sure you would have changed your insurance because for the delivery of the, because at least in Australia it's very expensive to go to private hospital to get a baby delivered. So you have
Yeah.
to change your insurance to have that pregnancy cover included.
Yeah. And so I think there's just so much more planning and time for it because you are, even before you make the decision, can I be a single mother by choice? You are asking yourself, can I even afford it? Can I afford
Yeah.
to, can my job allow me to do it? If you travel a lot, if
Yeah.
I can't travel anymore, who's going to watch my child? You're thinking about, is my family going to be able to support me in raising the child? Or do I need to get a nanny? Do I need, some people get a night nurse, babysitters, whatever it may be. That planning happens even before you make this decision. So there's
So in
so
your
much
mind, you
to.
have already made a decision, and you're just manifesting that decision in reality, actually.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, you spoke about donor sperm. I really want to know that how did you choose your donor? Because that's the most important decision, actually, because you're creating a life out of that donor. So, talk us a little bit about the donor program, how it works, and the rights of a child, and how did you navigated that donor process?
Sure. Yeah. So the first question you sort of have to ask yourself is, do you want to have known donor, meaning someone you know in your life, or unknown, meaning going through a sperm bank, right? And that's the first decision. And I did consider, I was of people in my life, whether they would be some of my gay friends. I thought, would they consider it? Or I didn't necessarily. I got the courage to ask one person because I thought, they were someone that I find, that I was close with, that I had a very special relationship with. But they kindly declined and said I couldn't have a child out there and not be a part of their life. And that was the deal, right? Like I didn't necessarily want the dad to be the donor, to be a part of their life. I just wanted the sperm in my case. And so for some, they like the involvement of a donor, and that's everyone's teach their choice. But for me, it would be sort of the sperm with no sort of involvement, not that they couldn't see them, but not in terms of raising the child. And so for me, that meant going with donor sperm and finding first the sperm bank that I would go with. So then finding a sperm bank that fulfills the compliance that needs to be fulfilled for any country. So some have compliant donors that can be approved by, Health Canada for us, so there's first selecting your sperm bank, and then it's deciding your criteria. So do you want an anonymous donor or an open ID donor? And that's the next big choice. Do you want your child to be able to contact the donor, or would you like it to be anonymous and they don't have that opportunity? Or would you like them to be able to, at the age of 18, be able to contact their donor or have their contact to be able to reach out to them? And for me, initially, I was so sure it was going to be anonymous because I just didn't see any involvement of my sperm donor being in their life. And then I realized that felt like I was coming from a place of fear, worrying, what would my child think of this donor? What would they be? Would they be upset that if they met them and they didn't like them, or whatever that was? And so I realized it was from a place of fear of me worrying that the child would not approve, like them, or not somehow disappoint them. And I didn't want that, obviously. And then I realized, maybe I am taking a decision away from my child in terms of wanting to meet their, biological father. And so I decided to go with an open donor so that they have that chance. And, I've spoken to other women who have gone through this process and their child is, well into their teens, 20s. And they said, I don't really care, Mom. I don't really care to know that other side. And then there are others who want to know, right? So it really depends on the child, but I wouldn't want to take that decision away from them. And there's no right or wrong way to choose in that aspect. It really is what feels right to you. There's no one right way. And so once you've decided, made that big decision, then it's criteria, whether it be certain cultural background, eyes, height, looks. I thought I was having a boy, so I wanted a tall donor. And so that was something that I was looking for initially. Education could be something that you'd want, going through have they gone through the genetic screening process and tested for all the disorders that they could have, so that you can check if you have any of those similar genetic disorders and not select that donor to avoid your child getting that and reducing that chance. So there are a lot of criteria that you may come down to. What I say to people who are going through this process, set your criteria that are important to you, see how many you come down to in the end. If you're still left with a lot, again, go through your criteria. Can you prioritize it any further to really bring down your profiles to a couple? And then at the end of the day, maybe it's the essay, maybe it's something about the profile, but imagine you had to take this profile and introduce it to your child. What would you say? How would you explain it? What would you say about why you chose this person? And one of them will then sort of come more naturally and feel right. And that might end up being the way you choose.
And how are you going to share this with, I know your daughter is just 2, she's still a toddler, she won't really understand this, but have you thought how you're going to introduce this whole idea to her, at what age? And do you have any concerns or fears, like how she might react or something like that?
Right now I'm her world, right? Like it's mama, 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 or nanny, or it's like right now it's just I am completely her world. She is starting to say the word dad. She is starting to see it in books. She is starting to see her friends. The dad picks up from daycare. So there was one day she was saying dad a lot, and I was like, oh, maybe she's starting to understand the role of a dad, but few days later, I haven't heard, weeks later, it's been weeks and I haven't heard her say it again. So um, they say it's around the age 4 or 5 that they start to ask questions around, who is my
Okay.
dad, or what is that? And so, for me, I did have this discussion with a counselor before I made my decision. Part of going through IVF, we have mandatory counselor sessions required. And so in that session, that was one of my questions, is how do I address this piece when the time comes? And they said, you can be straightforward and just say, a nice man donated their seed to mom so that doctors could take it and make you, because you were really wanted. Mommy really wanted to bring you into this world. But you don't have a dad, but you have a nani, you have dada, you have masa, masi, and we all love you so much. And that's sort of how you kind of start the conversation when they're little. And then as they get older, you start to show more and more of the profile, and give them more information as they have more questions.
Right. And tell us a little bit about your daughter. How is she? What has changed in your life? Uh, pre, I don't know, your daughter, pre-daughter, and then, post, how life has changed. Um, do you think it's the best decision you ever took in your life? Like, talk us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely the best decision of my life. My big regret is I didn't start this process sooner, and that I didn't make the call sooner. That is definitely always going to be my regret, only because it just means more time, right, to have with her. And so, yeah, I've been very blessed. I think, partly I wonder if I went through such a hard struggle to get pregnant, that I got, a daughter who sleeps well, eats well, is a very, very loving and wonderful daughter. I couldn't ask for a better daughter from what I've seen. And I think because I was also just so mentally prepared, I was educating myself as much as possible about sleep training, because I would have to get back to work pretty quickly given the business. How to transition to bottle so that I can go from, passing off the bottle so that, my mom could feed her, things like that. I really thought I was going to be exhausted, sleep deprived, doing everything on my own, right? Like, I will say the hardest thing sometimes is you wake up in the morning and there's no one to tap and be like, hey, can you get her while I can sleep in a little bit longer, right? Like, there's never that ability to just be like, hey, can you grab her so that I can just have a little bit more sleep? And then also when you're sick, it is the hardest thing to go through, because you're wanting to rest. Your temper is a bit short, like you're cranky. You want to just to get into bed, because that's what you used to do. You could just rest when you were sick. Now there's no opportunity. You're sick, they're sick, you've got to take care of them. And then by the time they go to sleep, then you can finally get a little bit rest yourself. So those are definitely the hardest times to push through, because they're cranky, they're going through all their feelings, and they're trying to figure this whole thing out too, and you're just trying to get through the day. So definitely the hardest part, but no regrets at the end of the day.
Okay. But I mean, so though at least there is some level of need of the other person in the equation, seems like. Because I think you're right. I mean, I remember you spoke at the beginning that it's not like that dads are not important and everything, but I think it's just that it doesn't have to follow a certain route. Like you find a man and then have a child, it can sometimes change, as in depending on the age. Because I think a woman's age is definitely our biological clock and our life goals sometimes don't coincide with each other, and sometimes um, they are in contradiction to each other. So, how is your family reaction now? How are things at home now? Um, you have a support system, seems like your parents and
Yeah,
everyone, but how are you managing otherwise? Because when you are doing it on your own, I think the biggest concern that women can have is that uh, to create that support system to raise a child. I mean, especially like you have your own business, but then there are a lot of women who have to go out to work every single day, and you
Yep.
can't just keep a small child at a daycare. And also, I think in countries like Canada, Australia, where the house help, etc., is a lot more expensive as compared to countries like India, where you can still get house help more easily and it's more accessible. So, what's your advice on that to other women?
Yeah, I mean, I did the traditional thing when she was born. I did move back with my parents and stayed with them for the first 2 months, just to get through, that initial phase. So I did have that kind of support that I was able to go home and have mom help me, just kind of adjust to new baby and that. So that was really helpful for me. And then after the 2 month mark, I said it's time to go back home and sort of get in. Like we got the routine down, and now it was time to do a routine at home. And so, for the most part, they sleep so much in the beginning that there is time to sort of rest and do work. And I was taking calls between naps because she was a great sleeper. So I would schedule it based on her very strict sleeping schedule. But it did work that I was able to do calls or Zoom calls and video calls while she was taking naps, and then she would wake up and then I'd be off. Um, so setting up a support system, again, that's something we start planning even before we make the decision. If I'm going to have a baby, who's going to watch the baby when I have to
Mhm.
go back to work? Who can I afford to have hired help? So
Mhm.
these decisions we've already building that support system is even more important as a single mom than it is for a two-parent home, because we know we don't have that backup to just say, hey, can you go get her from daycare today? I got a long meeting today, or whatever it may be, right? So that's where family either comes in, or my parents have, and mostly my mom, who has been able to step up and come in whenever I have some big meetings and need someone to grab her or be the backup. She's the extra
Mhm.
person on the emergency contact for daycare in case they can't reach me. So it is definitely a big peace of mind to know that it's mom getting her and not, any, like, there is someone I can trust, and that is a huge, huge, help.
Mhm. So, Rima, how do you envision your life from here on? I think we'll conclude the podcast with this question. In next, let's assume 10 years, or maybe 15 years, your daughter is a teenager or maybe an adult, let's assume at 18. How do you envision your life in next 10 to 20 years? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm still open to love, that's still something that I haven't closed the door on, and life will work in however it's going to work out. So there is that. I still hope that she will have a father figure in her life moving in the next, when I think about the future. And then, honestly, I think partly I feel like the hardest part is over, in the sense of, as they get older, they are becoming more and more independent. They're able to communicate more, they're able to share their needs more. And so, in some ways, it will get easier, obviously, in others, it will get more challenging. They will have more, activities and things, like just juggling it all will sometimes be a struggle. But I I don't I going through the first 2 years, I feel like once you've gotten through that, you feel like you can kind of get through the rest now, right? So uh, taking care of a little baby who's helpless and doesn't know anything and has certain needs, whereas now she's speaking, she's telling me what she wants, it is becoming a little bit easier. It is exhausting, and it is not for everyone. Um,
Yeah.
but it is, if motherhood is something you really want, it is an option, and it is something worth considering versus not choosing it. And for me, I felt like my life wouldn't have enough meaning if I didn't get to be a mom, and that was something important to me.
Yeah. No, amazing. I think your journey is so inspiring. You took a very courageous decision when you were like just 37. You're pretty young. So I think it's been an incredible journey. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your journey. I'm sure it would at least open a dialogue to something which would be very foreign to a lot of people. that what is this, can become a single mother by choice by using a donor sperm and going through IVF route, but it is possible, but also it comes with its own challenges and struggles and planning and all the things that we spoke about. So, thank you so much, Rima. I really wish you good luck in
Thank
this
you.
journey. And I hope that your daughter is proud of you once she grows up and she realizes that how much you wanted her. And that's why you went through so much to bring her to life. Thank you so much for taking out time.
Thank you. Thank you, Farrell.